So we've been hearing about the importance of implementing targets that will take us towards net zero. It's all about implementation. That's the name of the game now. So in this panel, we are going to be talking about the details that are going to get us there, hopefully. So let me introduce you to our panelists. So I'm going to start right on my left. Personifying reporting standards himself is Ravi Abeywardana, who is the ISSB technical director. So all the reporting standards are in his head, hopefully at this stage, and he's going to take us through what the ISSB has in store for all of you. For all of us, we've been having great fun trying to work out and keep up with all the ever-expanding alphabet soup of sustainability. We also have Hywel, who is UK chair and the UK&I managing partner for EY. And we also have Andy Agg, who is the CEO of National Grid. So thank you for joining me, and welcome again to all of you. So after this introduction, of course, we have to start with you, Ravi. So tell us, what have you been up to?
Not much, really. In fact, I jest. There's been quite a lot happening from an ISSB perspective. First of all, it was established at COP26, and following that, we've actually put in some management structure as well. So we've got a chair. So that's Emmanuel Faber, previous CEO of Danone. We also have a vice chair, Sue Lloyd. So she's jumped ships internally, in fact. Previously, she was the vice chair for the Accountancy Standards Board. Now she's the vice chair for the ISSB. We also have a special advisor in the name of Juliet, the CEO of the Value Reporting Foundation as well. So, and we're currently in a recruitment phase for the board members. We need to be corporate to actually deliberate on the consultations which we pushed out earlier this year. And in addition to that, we've also continued the momentum around the consolidation of those, a bit of the alphabet soup, the frameworks. So we've consolidated and completed the consolidation of the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, and we've also made a public announcement or a memorandum of understanding with the Global Reporting Initiative, and subsequently we'll be finishing the consolidation of the Value Reporting Foundation, which comprises of ISSB, another alphabet soup, as well as the Integrated Reporting Council. And finally, we've also released 2 exposure drafts as well. So at the back end of Q1, we released the general requirements on sustainability-related financial disclosures. And in addition to that, we've also released an exposure draft on climate-related financial disclosures. And those consultations are currently out for 120 days. It comes to a close on the 29th of July. And we do really welcome comments on this. We're looking to actually create that global baseline, as John Glenn had mentioned a moment ago. It's really, there's a real strong desire from capital markets and investors for clear and consistent sustainability-related financial information. And we're very much stepped up to that and just pushed out some exposure drafts, and they're open for comments. So hopefully, a whistle-stop tour of what we've been up to in the first half of this year.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm assuming all of you have, are aware of these exposure drafts, if not, perhaps even have gone through them. And of course, we may have 2 people here who you, Ravi, probably do want to get feedback from. So let's see what they think about the ISSB work, and perhaps even some details about the exposure drafts, whether they're going in the right direction, and what, anyway, sustainability reporting is meaning for your organizations and your clients in the case of EY.
Yeah. I'll go back to the COP26. It was that day on the Wednesday when Mark Carney announced GFANZ, the Chancellor talked about the transition plans, and the ISSB establishment was announced, was both exciting and actually in some ways historic. I mean, the word historic was used quite a lot around that. And I think the other thing which we've heard today that has been hugely important is what Minister Sharma said about the fact that business and finance turned up to COP at the same time. And I think all of that probably gets best encapsulated by Al Gore talking about the fact that the sustainability revolution is going to be the industrial revolution, it'll have the speed of the digital revolution. And then you hear earlier today Mark Carney talking very eloquently about this new financial system that's required to support the sustainability revolution. And funny enough, that got me thinking then about how our firm started. Ernst & Young's can trace its roots back almost 200 years to Glasgow, to one Arthur McClelland. And he started because the Industrial Revolution was starting and new forms of capital were being required. And if you then go on 100 years, modern company reporting, accounting starts in the 20s, it's the limited liability company, and we see another explosion in capital and change in value. And I think this sort of new financial system concept is a really important one to think about, because I think we're at this pivot point again, where we're moving from financial reporting now to broader stakeholder reporting, to broader non-financial reporting, and we need a new ecosystem. And a huge part of that ecosystem is the standards that we're all going to be governed by and to report to. So I think the ISSB has made a really strong start. They promised at COP that they would do it really quickly. I think coming out with exposure standards within 6 months is great. They're not reinventing the wheel. They've been, as they promised, they're building on the others. They're trying to consolidate the alphabet soup, so that's incredibly encouraging. We now need to get that consultation finished, and I encourage everyone to respond to that. We get IOSCO to approve it, and then we need to get the countries to adopt it. And that's, that's not necessarily going to be easy in itself. But I think everyone has heard today the need for speed and the time to move from the why to the how, and I think the ISSB is really important. But we need the whole ecosystem to work, otherwise we're going to lose trust in this new financial system very quickly.
So that's definitely very important, and I'm going to come back to you and ask you maybe a few more questions about what your clients are finding when dealing with sustainability reporting and the kind of questions that they are getting from their shareholders. Andy, how are you finding this whole process of reporting according to various standards and now getting your organization ready for this?
Thanks, and good afternoon, everybody. So, National Grid, and again, maybe going back to COP26, we were one of the principal partners, and I think the Minister in the previous session talked about the energy transition, and he talked about the other challenges in the sector, and I think it is absolutely a critical time, and at the same time, though, we as National Grid will be investing up to £35 billion over the next 5 years. So therefore, our investors, equity investors and debt investors, are clearly really focused on how we're taking that role forwards. And we've embraced from the start, so TCFD will be fully compliant this year. EU taxonomy, so back to your earlier comment about the alphabet soup, we've been living with that as a corporate for the last several years. So we're really excited about the opportunity to now go on the journey to bring that together. And it's absolutely critical, as I say, as a corporate. Our investors are now demanding more and more, so giving them consistency is going to be critical. We'll probably come back to that in a moment as well. So in terms of what we've seen, echo some of the previous comments. The pace is important. That's been talked about in other sessions today, and I think the fact that the ISSB has got themselves together, got off the ground, got those early disclosure or exposure drafts out there is really important. I think sometimes we've got to make sure perfection is sometimes the enemy of pace. We've got to make sure that isn't the case here. We haven't always seen that with IFRS, that sometimes we do aim for perfection. But I think as an issuer, I think it's definitely the step in the right direction. Yeah.
Okay, Ravi, did you want to add something?
No, very.
I saw you poised. Good. So clearly there is a lot of expectation placed on the work of the ISSB, of course, because It was created by FRS, which is widely and internationally accepted. So what's better place than to create these standards that we hope are going to bring a harmonized way of disclosing important information. But because we need to talk about the details here, I really would like to get us to talk about details at an organizational level, and I think I'll start with you. What does this mean? So sustainability reporting, and correct me if you don't have this view, but for some people have been placed, or for some organization, it has been placed under the responsibility, in some cases, of marketing, communication, with a standardized and widely accepted disclosure frameworks. I think is going to come closer and closer to the CFO office. Is this how you see it? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What does your CFO think?
No, thanks. I think the important thing actually, and for National Grid, sustainability is not just about reporting or telling a story. It's actually core to what we're trying to do, and actually our business model and how we need to evolve in the years ahead. You know, again, we've talked about the energy transition. Well, we are at the heart of the energy sector, and we need to be the leader of the energy transition. So sustainability is not something that can sit on the periphery of it. It's got to be at the heart of our corporation. So organisationally, it's a combination of those. It's operating model. It sits right alongside our strategy team in terms of what's the way forward. But absolutely, in terms of, you know, if we look across the group, my team has a huge role in setting the targets, measuring performance, monitoring, and obviously the assurance against those reporting standards as well. And we may touch on assurance again, which I think is a critical part of this journey from a reporting perspective. But more than that, I think, you know, ultimately it's how does the board focus on this? And ultimately, as in major companies, you know, the board's focus on issues is what really sets the tone and drives it. And for a National Grid, you know, we have a sustainability committee at board level. We obviously have an audit committee which looks at the reporting, but ultimately we have a very engaged board around this whole topic, and that's really the thing that sets the tone for us. Yeah.
And Hywel, you were nodding.
No, I agree. I think all the clients that we engage with, you're seeing the boards absolutely engaged in a way that they've not been. They'll all talk about, you know, they're going to the investor meetings, and it's gone from no questions to 80% of the time of the questions in the investor meetings. I'll quite often have conversations with audit committee chairs, and you'll ask them, what are the biggest risks you're worried about? And more often than not, the top two risks they'll talk about is cyber, and then control over non-financial reporting and sustainability reporting. They are, you know, that is what they're worried about, their reputation for their business. You go back to the, you know, greenwashing comments, but people are very concerned about this loss of trust as they try, as companies try to do our bit in terms of making the energy transition happen. And if we lose that trust, it'll be very difficult to get it back. You know, we'll have a very cynical audience out there in society, and it's not going to be easy.
Ravi, I guess that's what you are hoping to achieve, to create something that instills or retain trust in the system.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking to very much do what our sister organisation has really delivered from a financial standards perspective, where we want to get that trust in the actual financial markets to do with sustainability-related financial information, and to allow investors to ultimately have clear and consistent information. You can only really have that if you do have a comprehensive global baseline, and that's what we're trying to achieve here via the ISSB's mission.
Okay, great. And just to remind the audience that we are going to take questions at the end of the panel. We're going to allow actually for a good 10-15 minutes. So just get ready and start thinking about what you want to ask our panelists, and we'll make sure to allow you to do so. Great. So again, quite a lot of changes happening. There seems to be a little bit of a momentum growing, even just listening to the speeches this afternoon. So there were so many keywords or important words that kept on being repeated, and the ISSB actually was one of them. And disclosures, the lack of disclosures, or the lack of also of disclosure that is granular enough. Now, to be able to find that information, process it, and then disclose it, companies also need to have the right setup, both in terms of organizational setup, both in terms of systems and the adoption of new ways of working. So what are you doing to move in that direction? And is it possible to do it even before you get, for example, the final proposals from Ravi, in this case?
Yes. So I think, as you asked me a moment ago, I think that's where the finance function in any big company has a key role to play, because that's what we do with financial reporting. We capture the data, we report it, we assure it, we consolidate it, and we report it externally. So the skill set, the capabilities, the checks and balances that we apply are absolutely consistent with the processes around non-financial data. I think the addition of standards which we can then hold ourselves against in terms of how to do that is the critical next piece of the journey. But as I said in my opening remarks, it's not something we've been sat here waiting for. We haven't been able to do that. The demand from investors, from other agencies externally has meant we've been on this journey for several years already. We've published our own, what we call a responsible business report, covers everything from climate change, sustainability, our societal commitments, our responsibilities to the wider community. And we've done our best to pull together the rest of the alphabet soup, so GRI, ISSB, the rating agencies, they all have different ways of measuring. So we've done our best over the years to formulate our reporting against that. That's why I see the ISSB now as that first step towards trying to corral it together. But as we were talking before, I see it as a first step. There's a lot more still to do on that journey. Yeah.
A lot of learning, I would imagine, also very much from an accountant's point of view. So accountants have been used to dealing with information in a certain way, and now they have to deal with completely different information, which is only now trying to be defined and still very much open to interpretation. And where do you even put it? Where do you find historical data? How do you base your views on?
Yeah.
So that's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that we can rely on those 200 years of experience to bring to bear, but there is a domain knowledge now that we need to apply to the processes, the behavior sets that the finance and the assurance profession have to bring to bear on it. So, but this is not new. So, we started invested in climate specialists 25 years ago. We've got 2,500. We're just going to say the next 3 years we're going to invest another 100 million and put another 1,300 in. Finding them is not easy because everyone's doing.
Yes, who do you look for? Yes, what kind of...
Well, you've got to look for the skills, but people are so passionate about this area that they are so willing to change, to reinvest their time, to get up the curve, to bring their other technical skills to bear, and then learn, I'm going to say, that domain knowledge to do it. We have no shortage of willing volunteers. And I think for the young graduates, for them to join, I think one of your colleagues, Julian Ted, sort of prodded me and said, when I was moaning about getting the attractiveness of the profession a year or so ago, she said, you just need to go and recruit thousands of eco-warriors out of the youth, because they'll be driven by the purpose, we'll see the ability to really do a difference in terms of an importance. So I think we've got the support, but we need to ramp up very quickly in terms of the capacity to respond. But we've got a bit of history of the plumbing of what happens with reporting and how to make sure we deliver that assurance.
So did you go out and recruit the eco-warriors, as Gillian?
We're in the process, though. I mean, it's amazing how when you go to graduate on campus and you start talking about that sort of side of it, and the people, that new graduates can have this ability to both get the classic professional finance accounting qualification but to layer on. So things that we're doing, we've started a sustainability masters with a Holt Business School, so that people can then take their accountancy and then layer on a master's in sustainability. We do a lot of individual training in different skills, and we call it badges. So we have a sustainability badge. Sounds a bit like the Boy Scouts, but believe me, it sort of works. And so many people want to do that sustainability badge to start learning their domain knowledge, because ultimately, if we go back to the whole ecosystem is going to change this new financial system. Every single skill and competency that we probably do in our business will need a sustainability lens.
Yes.
So it's not just about having a small team of specialists. Everyone will have to be able to talk about this and understand the risks and the concepts at play.
think if I may just to echo a lot of that, but I think one of the other skills as we think about this area is, financial reporting, when we've done that for many years, is often backward looking. By the time you report it out, you're reporting on the last year. There's been a lot of talk, and even in the sessions today, obviously, a lot of focus on transition plans, which are all forward looking. So when we think about the adoption of standards and the reporting that investors and other stakeholders want to see, yes, of course, they want to see the actuals and they want to see what have we actually delivered on that plan. But they also want to see what we're forecasting going forward. And so the capabilities around looking forward, the assurance around forward-looking plans is going to be something else that we really have to focus on.
I mean, it is going to be the biggest challenge, but it's a very exciting one.
And these are really interesting comments which have been discussed here. And there may be challenges from a preparer perspective with regards to what's in the actual requirements itself. And they do build upon TCFD and the SASB standards. So a lot of companies, including yourself, are reporting against that already. However, we do welcome comments with regards to certain complexities which companies are having. And we can kind of flex the actual standards themselves to actually just, reflect some of those challenges to maybe different phased-in periods for the actual standards, possibly around scenario analysis if companies are struggling around that.
Very well. So before opening the floor to questions, it would probably be interesting to get from the three of you where you hope to be in a year from now, as in all of us, the economy, the financial sector of the world, when it comes to transitioning to a greener and just economy. And with the application, starting with the very important application of these disclosures. Again, we said the devil is in the details, so it's now all about implementation. So Ravi, from your point of view, where would you like to be? How would a good place look like for you in a year from now?
Yeah, of course, it's a great question. I think we need to continue the momentum. There's huge support behind the ISSB, and we need to continue that. For myself, and in fact the organisation, we're very much looking to actually fully analyse all of the comments which we received by the 29th of July on the two exposure drafts, both the general requirements and the climate exposure draft, and look to actually re-deliberate and push out the final standard by the end of this year. But this is very much dependent upon the quantity and also the quality of comments which we get through as well. And very much for jurisdictions to actually start mandating this as well. So really delivering upon what we want to deliver the market, and deliver to IOSCO and also the G20 as well, which is that global comprehensive baseline for sustainability-related financial information so that investors can assess enterprise value. It's really important. So that's what I'm looking to actually, really deliver. But in the interim, these standards, whilst jurisdictions do actually pick this up, they can be applied voluntary. And just for those in the room, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We have built upon TCFD and SASB standards, which have all been out in the public domain for quite a while. So welcome your comments, and we'll look to actually see what we can do towards the back end of this year.
Very good. So obviously I'm going to leave, first Hywel and Andy the time to share their thoughts, and then the audience, but I'm definitely, if we have time, going to go back to you about the issue of making these disclosures mandatory and the work that you're doing with other jurisdictions around the world.
Well, I'm going to start with a bit of disappointment and then hope. So my previous role was head of audit for the UK, and I think I've been involved in so many different reviews over the last 5-7 years, sort of culminating with the Queen's speech yesterday, where the audit reform and corporate governance bill have been delayed in terms of establishing it. And actually a disappointment that I was an advisor to the Bryden Review. For those in the Bryden, we were recommending very strongly that non-financial reporting was being captured both in terms of the reporting side and the assurance side. So I'm sort of left with a touch of regret that I can't see that happening from government too shortly. There may be the ability for the FRC, the new ARGA, to start bringing through and to talk about corporate governance in a voluntary way. So I think we're all going to be left with the need to do voluntary action. To preempt your comment about mandatory, that is not going to happen that quick, but voluntary adoption.
Although next door in the EU, they are working on mandatory disclosures. So maybe they're also coming.
They may be coming, yeah. But the government's not. And Mary Shapiro talked about a well-regulated market will actually accelerate progression as well when she was doing it. But I think we can't wait for government per se in terms of that regulation.
Thank you.
Just to maybe to echo your comments there, I'd like to see these two new standards. Let's get them in. Let's get hopefully some voluntary adoption. We may well be one of those in a year's time, and then we learn and evolve from there. And I think keeping that pace up is what I'd like to see in it over the next year. I think the piece about looking globally at this, investors are global. We're talking here in the UK, many UK listed companies, but we talk to investors around the world, and we're having to wrestle today with the SEC has obviously just come out with its mandate. We've got EU taxonomy. We heard the minister mention UK taxonomy. As you mentioned, the EU's looking at its reporting standards as well. So we still see this evolution of continued sort of localization as well. So in a year's time, I'd love to feel that we've made a step forward in that space.
Okay, so well thought out standards that are globally accepted, and I guess lots of openings for accountants in all your organizations. Right, perfect. So let's now see whether, yes, there is already a question. Over there, if you could also introduce yourself. And there is a microphone. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie de Jonker. I'm with TD Securities, and my question is perhaps a bit basic, but in the context of pretty broad reporting fatigue, I would say. Very practically speaking, there's been some confusion in different iterations, I think, over the past 6 months. Is ISSB going to be another reporting platform that streamlines metrics across CDP, SASB, TCFD, and now GRI, or is it going to subsume the other organizations and make those disappear? And a second part of that question is that now TCFD is actually mandated in some jurisdictions, right? The US Securities and Exchange Commission just required TCFD reporting. So if ISSB is going to replace TCFD, what happens in the countries where TCFD is now mandated, especially if ISSB now requires GRI level reporting across ES and G, not just climate risk? Sorry, that's a lot.
No, thank you. Ravi.
Wow.
So, yes, I mean, how big and powerful is the ISSB going to be? And obviously the big question mark over what the US may choose to do.
Yeah, of course. It's a fantastic question. Often it's a common question as well. And what we're looking to do from an ISSB perspective is consolidate the reporting space. And we've seen that via the consolidation of SASB. We're in that process, and that's going to be completed by June of this year, so next month, in fact. And we've also consolidated the Climate Disclosure Standards Board earlier this year. We've just entered into a memorandum of understanding with GRI to very much create that sort of consistency between both bodies. And it's important that does happen from a preparer perspective, but also clarity for the market as well. It's also very important to actually note that the standards themselves, which have been released by the ISSB, have taken very much a building blocks approach. One, because we have consolidated SASB. So that's evident in the climate exposure drafts themselves, in particular the industry-specific requirements. It's verbatim, apart from a few nuances here or there. So that's comforting. And also, with regards to the TCFD, they form part of the actual technical readiness working group, which led up to the actual formation of the ISSB. And they can still continue to form part of our internal technical team as well, the TCFD. So we very much look to create something which is very familiar to the market. And we also have those, we just set up a jurisdictional working group as well. And it includes the likes of the US SEC, as well as the European Commission as well, to ensure that there is consistency and alignment between these the jurisdictional requirements and the global baseline which the ISSB is looking to achieve. And what we're trying to achieve here is that global baseline so that jurisdictions can mandate and build on the top of that, including the likes of the US or the EU.
So we could have very similar frameworks, but I guess not conceivable that there is only going to be one, right? So we probably end up with 3, maybe, in an optimistic scenario. TCFD in the States, IFRS.
This is how possibly you could come from a financial reporting perspective, but we're looking to actually deliver what the IFRS has done from an accounting standards perspective. It has created a global baseline for financial reporting, the IFRS accounting standards. It is then up to jurisdictions to actually mandate that. It's mandated across 144 jurisdictions, including the UK. So we're looking to have that very same principle for the ISSB as well.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, at the back.
Hi everyone, Matt Scott from WTW. Thanks for the really interesting panel. Obviously, there's so much going on in the climate space right now. And one of the things that we're finding quite interesting is whether carbon is a measure of sort of climate risk or is it a measure of climate impact? And I just wondered if there was a view from the ISSB in terms of where carbon reporting fits within reporting standards.
Yeah. That's a very good question, and how we've looked at this is very much from a TCFD lens. Climate, a company's impacts on climate can ultimately come back and bite the company from a financial perspective, whether it's performance or position over the short, medium and long term. So the actual impacts which companies are currently reporting, whether it be their scope 1, 2 or 3 GHG emissions, is important information for investors. Well, that's what we're hearing, primarily because they can actually understand whether there's a potential regulatory risk or a transition risk from a company's exposure to climate change. So it's very much interrelated. And the reason why we've entered into an MOU with GRI, there are commonalities, but we're very much looking at this from a financial perspective and supporting the actual markets via what Mark Carney often refers, addressing the plumbing so that the information from an entity can actually ultimately go up to the capital markets, so that the capital markets can actually ascertain where the sustainability-related financial risks are, whether they be climate or other sustainability risks, and pump money in to address that. So hopefully that's addressed your question.
Yeah, right. So it's a measure for both, and I would imagine that investors are also asking because it creates a bit of a cycle, even if we just look at financial risk. Perfect. Any other questions? Oh, right there. Yes.
Hello, Kate Levick from E3G. I wanted to ask about how the ISSB might expect to update the framework over time. And I'm thinking about how, sustainability disclosures are a slightly more dynamic field, possibly, than financial accounting. Not that I wish to cast any aspersions on financial accounting, but there are lots of different ways in which norms can change. They can change because science changes. They can change because maybe sort of societal values shift. And also, there may be issues where jurisdictional approaches that build on the level playing field might start to become more international norms. So what will be the process by which the ISSB norms can be updated, and will it be as static as the financial accounting can be, or will there be a more dynamic process going forwards?
Thank you. Great question.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think I'm going to try and overlay this with the importance of due process as well. So which is often a very boring topic, but it's very important for the ISSB, in fact, the IFRS Foundation. It's how it garners its independence. But we're going to have to be dynamic here, but without putting the due process at threat here. we need to continue this momentum as well. It's very important. Sustainability matters are very dynamic, and later on this year, we're looking to actually push out a consultation to garner feedback from yourselves and those online with regards to what should we do after climate. So it's very important. Sustainability is wide. Companies are at risk of multiple different sustainability-related risks and opportunities, whether they be human rights issues or water or whatever they may be. So we're working at pace, but without really threatening that due process, and some thinking is being done with regards to how to make that a dynamic.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. There isn't, I guess, a timeline in mind every year, but it is going to be updated.
Yeah.
Fairly regularly.
Okay.
Yes, you're prepared to say that.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Right, yes, another question at the back.
Along with the evolution in reporting to account for non-financial criteria, are there any plans to revamp accounting, the P&L?
We're all looking at you, Ravi.
It's a very interesting question, and the IFRS Foundation does include both the ISSB as well as the International Accountancy Standards Board. There will have to be connectivity. We're connectivity between both boards, and the IASB has just landed on intangibles as a new area for them to actually push on with. And I think this is going to be an area for us to actually push on with as well, because it's really important within the actual general requirements. We stress the importance of connected information back to the financial statements. So it's really important that we do that.
And I don't know if this is quite where your question was going, but there are elements of TCFD which are already doing that today. So part of TCFD is what might these risks, or what does climate change potentially mean for some of your financial information and financial balances. So some of that's already there. So I'm not sure we'd have a wholesale revision of the P&L, but we'll wait and see.
Right. So the work on intangibles, I think, is quite interesting, and we should probably dedicate another panel to that. And I wonder whether if they crack that, intangibles, then does it mean that your work on climate reporting is going to be redundant?
I don't think so.
All right, well, we shall see. Great. Any other questions? We still have 3 seconds. Otherwise, was there a question? Yes, let's try and squeeze it in.
Okay, one last one, if I may, again, on the SASB or the ISSB and GRI MOU. It is my understanding that part of the objective of that MOU is seeking to also support the fact that there's a large cohort of market participants very focused on materiality at a sector-based level and materiality to enterprise value, and other jurisdictions that place quite a lot of emphasis on double materiality and impact. And part of the objective of the MOU is to just seek clarity that the ISSB is seeking to be the global baseline, sector-based, material decision useful, and the GRI's domain could remain meeting the demands of issuers, regulators, and investors seeking to have a lens on double materiality. Is that fair? And maybe one last question to close on. We're starting to now see shareholder proposals holding to account the role of the auditor in preparing financial statements, and certainly financial statements as it pertains to appropriate disclosure of climate risk. Is that something you anticipate might escalate going forward, or do you think that could be a fad?
Right, so double materiality and financial risk.
Yeah, and then just a question on shareholder engagement with the audit community on the roles and responsibility of audit.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll give the audit committees to itself. But with regards to the MOU between GRI and the ISSB, I often go back to this. We're looking to just create that comprehensive global baseline for investors to actually assess enterprise value. And it is a baseline in which jurisdictions such as the EU can add on policy requirements beyond that. and this goes into the space of the GRI. However, there are commonalities between what we've released into the public domain and what the GRI has. And here we're looking to actually create that sort of connectivity in those requirements. So both, our exposure draft when it comes to climate requires an entity to disclose GHG scope 1, 2, and 3. We're looking to actually create, commonality with regards to the actual requirements, so that when it comes to an entity who needs to report, on double materiality, there is just one document which they just need to refer to. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, great.
And apologies, I didn't hear all of the question about the audit committee engagement, but I think if it's, linking back to the Bayes consultation around greater audit committee engagement with investors, that's something we're very open to, and not just audit committee, I think other board, the chair and so forth. I think one of the debates that it leads to is what do, certainly the larger investors, what do they actually want and what would they see value from? Because sometimes, we offer opportunities, governance meetings and so forth, and sometimes the attendance is mixed. So I think, for me, the value would be in a dialogue is how can corporates like us best offer and meet what investors actually want in that space, whether it is, as you say, around the insurance side of things with audit committees, the sustainability committees, how we're thinking about the issues around, climate change, or the chair level at the top. So for me, it's a great opportunity to have a better dialogue about how corporates can best offer that engagement.
Very well. So I guess we're still fine-tuning the language of sustainability, and hopefully disclosures are going to help us all talk the same language. At least we are really out of time now. So thank you again so much. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, and thank you all for your very interesting and lively questions. And I hope that's a reflection of all the feedback that you will be getting, Ravi, about the ISSB exposure drafts. So. Thank you again so much, and apologies to the organizers for having run slightly out of time. Thank you again.